Hello? So we'll continue with part 2 of this book, Talking to Terrorists. The undertitle is Understanding the Psychosocial Motivations of Militant Jihadi Terrorists, Mass Hostage Takers, Suicide Bombers, and Martyrs by Anne Speckard. Okay. So in this section, chapter 7, she calls it Entering Palestine. And given the historical situation between Israel and Palestine, this is almost of necessity going to be political in a certain way, right? She is, I think, making an interesting choice here in focusing her interviewing efforts on the Palestinian side and not the Israeli viewpoint. So it comes across as very sympathetic to the terrorists. This is something that's a little hard to deal with and conceptualize, right? Because when you hear so-and-so walked into a crowded movie theater and blew up themselves using a bomb they had strapped, managing to kill both themselves and 15 women or children next to them, and then injure another 90, and there are folk now missing limbs, and there are families that are dead because of this one person. And on the one hand, to repeat the word one again, we want to look at that and go, oh my gosh, how could someone be so terrible? How could someone be so evil? On the other hand, we want to look at that and go, oh, that poor kid. I mean, what drives you to not just kill somebody, but like strap a bomb to yourself, wander into a movie theater full of folk just enjoying a film and then exploding? Right, like that's the point of this, is what drives people to this. It's not normal, it's not regular, or at least we don't think it is, but there is a veneer of normality and regularity to it, right? This event has been going on for years. We've been hearing our entire lives about Israel and Palestine and the fighting and the back and forth, and each side is like, well, they did this and they did this, and we can't trust them, and the whole thing's horrific, of course. But to believe entirely one side, I think, is... okay, perhaps not. Believe isn't the right word. To emphasize entirely with one side is problematic. Really, the question should not be which side is more wrong, or which side is driven to this, or which side is making this happen, or which side is unreliable. The question is, how do you stop it? I referenced last time the Oslo Accords as an absolute idiotic choice and as a failure, because they set up all these little enclaves. They brought back the PLO, put them in charge, ended up turning them into the Palestinian, the PA, Palestinian Association, whatever it's called, and causing all this infighting, causing all these interactions between Jews and regular people and soldiers day in and day out. This eventually leads to these Israeli settlements, which are very obviously an attempt to destroy the idea of Palestine. And one idea that I've read about in other books that seems repeated over and over again from at least the Israeli side is, well, we did the Oslo Accords and we were working towards a solution, but then the Palestinians weren't accepting of that. They sent people into Israel and blew themselves up. They launched the second Intifada. There was all this rebellion and violence, and we tried, is the idea, but really, from what I've seen of the Oslo Accords, there was no trying. it was ridiculous to think that something like that could lead to peace, and then because we see this all the time, right? In agreements, or we read about it at least, so and so have come to an agreement, and they've set down on these few things, and they're going to figure out the rest later. But how often is it that, no, you don't figure out the rest later? This is a ceasefire. This isn't a solution. No one's actually interested in no one with power, at least, is interested in a solution. But, that's my viewpoint from half the planet away, from reading books and talking to people and being involved in interviews like this, right? That this is a fight in the style of the old barbaric tribes from thousands of years ago. We want to think that people are civilized and normal, they aren't traumatized, that we can understand and talk with each other straight, with straight language, face to face, being direct and honest, and that we can come to an agreement that benefits everybody. But you read a bit of history, and it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you have two groups, and they fight and fight and fight. How many does it take to start up the fighting again? Can one person exploding themselves at the right time cause two entire nations to go to war? If you are an organization or a government, how well can you control your people? There's millions of them, and you have all these issues. One of the problems we have today in Israel, right, is that the right-wing side of the political equation has been in charge for a very long time, and they are not interested in peace. That results in a two-state solution or a one-state solution. And on the other side, the Palestinian side, you have the PA and Gaza and Hamas and all these different groups and terrorist organizations. I looked it up once, like how many terrorist organizations are there in the West Bank, and there were like 30 of them, all independent from one another. Then the PA was supposed to be the official recognized government, but they haven't had an election in years. Hamas is the same, right? Was elected to their office and then refused any more elections, which makes a mockery of the whole process, of course. But again, I'm talking from half a world away. I'm talking from my knowledge and my experiences and my feelings about history. I have hopes that there's an agreement to be reached. I have hopes that the mothers and the children and the sons can rise above their historical issues and achieve a means of peace. But as this book tends to show, I read this book, oh gosh, I want to say like 2013, 2014. It came out in 2012, right? So I was pretty young when I encountered this. And I think it has influenced some of my thought processes about this. But enough of my ranting. Hopefully that's driven anyone away who holds an absolute view of this political issue. And I can start talking about the actual people involved here and their views. And all the complications that death and trauma cause to individuals and entire peoples, and the way they react. Okay, so to sort of set the stage here, She says, the next morning we gather at a tent with students protesting against the construction of what the Israelis call the security fence and what Palestinians call the wall. Made up of 24-foot-high semi-movable barriers, the security wall is a huge, continuous cement barrier separating Palestine and Israeli territory that will ultimately be close to 500 miles long. There's also a 180-foot exclusionary alongside the wall, which is equipped with sensors to prevent prospective suicide bombers from climbing over in unpatrolled areas. In 2000, according to Israeli security statistics, 73 mass attacks took place, killing 293 Israelis, wounding 1,950 between September 2000 and August 2003. After the completion of the wall in 2003, the number of attacks dropped from 73 to 12. But opponents of the wall argue that it is placed well inside the Green Line, constituting an illegal attempt to annex Palestinian land under the guise of security. Palestinians also argue that the wall preempts any final negotiations over the status of their country, severely restricts access to work in Israel and free movement within the West Bank. So to set the stage, there is literally a giant wall between these two countries. There is literally such a fear of attack from one side that the Israelis built a 500-mile concrete barrier. Right? The expense and effort put to that. And to get through, to go into Israel, you have to pass through a checkpoint. You have to be looked at. There is a soldier standing there making sure that you are safe. And from what I understand, you have large numbers of Palestinians who work inside Israel, right? Because there's not much of a industry inside the Palestinian territories. The Israelis control the border. So who are you going to trade with? Jordan? Lebanon? Iran? No, you're going to trade with Israel. So there is this economic rule, essentially, and also a military rule. There's soldiers and guns and walls everywhere, right? This isn't the free land of the brave. This isn't a place where people talk to each other openly and honestly. This is a land, as I understand it, which is dangerous, unsafe, and fractured. Right? Things like these, like 500-foot walls, are awesome symbols, I think. So I want to keep this in mind as I'm reading over these. Like, there's this literal symbol that you see and you know about on each side, right? We have to put a wall in order to protect ourselves from the Palestinians. Or this wall is a symbol of Israeli power over us that steals our land. You know, one of the issues in England, for example, that caused massive public disruption were the enclosure laws. Previously, free public land was enclosed in fences and taken over by lords, and you had hundreds, thousands of people now dispossessed of their ancient territorial lands, of their grazing areas, and they were kicked out of town. You know, my family may have been farming this plot of land for 15 generations, and now it's gone. It's taken from me because I don't have power. I don't have rights. So it's the same idea here, right? People are afraid. People are beaten up. And how do people act when they're in that environment? Right. So the first young man that Nadia has arranged for us to interview was an 18-year-old boy of medium height and slim build who served time as political prisoner in Israel. How were you arrested? I ask. Says, I was in the 12th grade at the time, 17. I was at home and it was 3 a.m. when they pulled up in jeeps and came into the house with guns. My mother couldn't do anything but cry. They demanded that everyone leave the house and go outside. It was winter and my brother was only 2 years old and sleeping, so my father asked if we could leave him inside. The Israeli soldiers said, if you don't go and get him now, I will go and kill him. outside with my brother crying. They asked for IDs. He asked me, "Are you Mustafa?" I said yes. The soldier then went to my father and told him, "Your son is in big trouble. He's putting you in danger too." The soldier turned to me and said, "Say goodbye to your family." He ordered me to lie down on my stomach and then tightly cuffed my hands behind my back. I tried to move, but the plastic cut my wrists. "Does it hurt?" the soldier asked. "Yes," I answered. Then he tightened it even more. There were 4 arrests that night in the same village. They put 2 of us in each jeep, blindfolded. It took 3 hours from my house to the detention center. And the soldiers hit and punched me, kicked and rifle butted me on my face everywhere the whole way. So surprised and sickened to hear of the alleged brutality of the Israeli soldiers, I don't comment, asking instead, "Do you know why you were arrested?" "No idea," Mustafa answered. So I stayed in the interrogation center for 36 days. There were interrogations 2 times a week. They could last from 2 to 9 hours. Right? So this is something that happens with a lot of Palestinian kids, as I understand it. You are arrested, tossed in jail, interrogated, and told that you're bad and you're horrible, told that you're in danger, told that if you don't give up information, then you're going to suffer or your family's going to die or something like this. And this is happening at 3 a.m. So I imagine you're the kid next door, right? You hear some Jeeps in the morning. You wake up, it's dark out, you look outside, there's a bunch of soldiers next door, and you quickly duck your head, hoping nothing happens. The next day, your friend, your neighbor is gone, and there's no information about it. In the United States, we think that, okay, we're arrested, you get tossed in the drunk tank, then I can go to the police office and I can ask about you and they'll tell me information. I can get a lawyer and find out where you were transferred to and so on. Then there's visiting hours. In a lot of this Israeli prisons here, that doesn't happen, right? You don't know how long you're in there. You might not know where your child, your friend, or your sister is. Right? He says, "No contact with family or outsiders was allowed." An institute got me a lawyer, but I was allowed to see him just 2 times in 36 days and just for 10 minutes each time. It was a very horrifying phase with a very big effect in my life. I became more aware of others, more mature, and more aware of the Palestinian struggle. So this, I think, is something to notice. Like, if I try to talk about similar events, it's kind of hard to come up with something with quite the same magnitude to it. But it is on the line of realizing that someone sees you as a man or a woman, right? Realizing you're being sexualized by others and that they see you in a certain way. The old guy, you're 14 growing, and the old guys, just give you a bit of side eye, or they try to touch you and you're like, "Oh, okay, something is different. I'm seen as different in the world." Or you're a guy and it's a little more rare there, but right, imagine you wear nail polish to school one day because you're 7 years old and you think it's cool or pretty. You get there and all of a sudden you're laughed at and you realize, oh, like, people see me in a certain way and I'm not supposed to do this. And the same thing happens when you're racialized, right? Oh my gosh, they see me as black. They don't even want to know who I am and what I am. Or they see me as white. They don't care how I believe or how I act. They just see me in this way. You travel and, oh, they don't like Americans. Or well, they just think I'm Mexican. Right? And all of a sudden your mindset shifts. All of a sudden you see the world differently. You don't see yourself differently, but you see that the world has a viewpoint of you, an opinion of you, of who and what you are, and they don't even know you. And I think this is the beginning of the transition. Right? Nobody's born a terrorist. Nobody is born thinking, I'm going to be part of this political movement. No, they grow into it. They think what kind of tends to happen here. Right? You're told you're bad, so you decide, you know what, the hell with it. I'm going to be bad. You know, they told me, everyone expects me to steal, so I may as well get something out of it. Because if I don't steal, then they're still going to accuse me of stealing or being a gangbanger, or running drugs or something, or you know, you can't afford a car this nice. What are you doing in this part of town? So you can deny. You can choose to be someone else, but if there's always this insistence, if you walk by a soldier every day and he sees you as a Palestinian, or you are a soldier, right? And people walk by you every day and they see you as a soldier, as an Israeli soldier, and you're just a figment of a person, then you have this miscommunication arising. You have each side thinks of the other as evil or bad or in a certain way, and all of a sudden you can't talk about racism or sexism or terrorism or nationality or history or any of this, because like when you hear me talking, do you hear an American? Do you hear a white guy? Do you hear some intellectual? Do you hear someone who doesn't have life experience? Do you hear some depressed guy in a garage? Do you hear some idiot who doesn't know what your struggle or your issue is or the reality of the world? Or do you hear me as an individual, as who I am? Right? I've put hours and hours into talking about ideas because I'm trying to both identify myself and show myself. Right, but in all these complexities and all the history I have, but sometimes that history is bad. Sometimes that history involves traumas. Right? When I ask him about that particular martyr, he says he was the leader in our cell. They murdered him during interrogations, beat him to death. He says, I want to have my freedom, my rights. I want to live like a human. I want to live like anyone else. I want to go back to my land. Definitely, I will die for it. You know? Life is unfair. They took my human rights. Every moment when you passed the line of death, you were already dead. At first, I don't understand what he means by this, but another one of the boys, someone who I will record as Jamal, later explains, he's a line drawn inside him and it's already crossed. It's too much pain. He will do anything to make it stop. Every Palestinian has this line and many have crossed over it. And this line of pain, I think, is important to see here, because we can recognize that within ourselves, right? We can say that something terrible has happened to us, or we can recognize that there is a point at which we are going to explode with rage. There is only so much we can deal and handle before something breaks or twists and doesn't twist back. I think anyone who has dealt with bullies, for example, right? You sitting in the schoolyard and someone comes and knocks your book out of the way, or someone comes and shoves you, or someone comes in and throws something at you. You look at them and you tell them to knock it off, you ignore them. You try to walk away, they follow you around. You mind your own business and you're sitting in class, they come and they whack you in the back of the head. The teacher didn't see. And if you respond, all of a sudden you're going to be in trouble. And this happens day after day, week after week, until what do? You take a swing. You try to hit back. It doesn't always work, especially if there's a group of them, but you hit back. You don't stand there and take it, or you try to tell somebody about it, right? You go to the yard duty, you go to the teacher, you go to the principal, you go to your parent, and you say, this is happening to me, make it stop. And they can't. Right? We want to pretend that the bully is always someone who you can stand up to, someone who you can talk with, someone who has problems at home, and if you just understand them, if you empathize with them, they will stop being a bully. And sometimes Sometimes that works. Sometimes that helps. But sometimes they're just mean. Sometimes they feel powerless themselves. Sometimes you gotta punch them back in the face. Right? Sometimes you gotta get into that fight. And it's not about winning or losing the fight. It's about having the fight. It's about for your own pride in yourself. It's about for your own self-identity, right? Am I gonna be someone who never stands up to this bully? Am I gonna be a loser? Am I gonna suffer like this my time? Am I gonna go into the next grade and the next grade and the next grade and this is gonna be my life forever? Just suffering is beats me up every Thursday after school. You got to do something. It's the same at a job, right? You think, you can be stuck at a job and you hate it and you hate it and you hate it. And then one day you just, you know what? I've had enough. I'm leaving. Or you can be abused by a spouse or a parent. And you're beat up and you're ridiculed and there's cuts on you and whip marks where nobody can see. And one day you say, I am done. I'm leaving. The problem, of course, with a lot of these kids in something like Palestine is if you fight back, you're shot and killed. If you tell somebody, say the UN, nothing happens. If you try to get away, you can't. Right? You can't go into Israel, they don't want you. You can't go to any of the Arab countries, they don't want you. At least not en masse, as an individual maybe, but like one of the issues of the Palestinian struggle, which is historically interesting, let's say, is the influence of Jordan and Egypt over this event. Right? The unwillingness of each to accept large numbers of a displaced population to their own countries because of the dangers and the problems inherent in that. That we can take so much, like in Lebanon, right? You can take so much, but if we let the entire nation in, then we won't be the nation that we are anymore. We'll be their nation. And they'll want to go back to their ancestral land. We'll get brought up in that, or there's a bunch of terrorist organizations there, or they are very friendly with a nation like Iran that isn't friendly with us, or, they're very religious and Islamic and we're our secular government. Any possible reason could apply. But, right? It's the same thing that happens to us, just in different ways. Right? Suicide researcher Ed Schneidman, who wrote that the common psychological stimulus for suicide is intolerable psychological pain. Psychic, as he called it. Thus, even a normally healthy person who has pushed past his limits of psychic pain is very vulnerable to suicide. Sometimes life just isn't worth it. And there's two ways, and if you think life isn't worth it, and there's two ways out of that, right? You can die on your own and say, you know what, life isn't worth it, I'm out, toodaloo. Or you can say, life isn't worth it, I'm going to hit back at those people who have made life not worth it. I'm going to die in a spectacular fashion. I'm going to make people remember me. I'm going to do something with my death because I can't do anything with my life. This is one of those issues that people don't like to talk about and people don't like to look at. They hear suicide and blow yourself up and attack the convoy with the convoy of soldiers with guns and rocks. And they think, oh no, this poor person, we must help them, all their psychological problems, we need to make a good environment for them. A suicide is bad, is wrong, but the fact of the matter is lots of people do choose this route. And there's a reason for that. There's something to understand here. Instead of blanketly saying it's wrong, you want to ask, why do they choose this without condemning? Because one of the bigger problems with suicide, I would say, is that if you're suicidal, You may express this in actions, but you're not going to say to someone, oh, I think I might want to kill myself. You're not going to say to someone, like your family member. We see this over and over and over again in the book. Right? Some kid is talking to a family member, and they're pretending it's all normal and fine, and they go and kill themselves, and their family's like, I didn't know. He didn't say anything. She didn't tell us. Why? Because you're thinking of killing yourself, and you're ashamed of that. Right? You don't want to even say that, oh my gosh, I don't know if life is really worth it. Because people are going to react to you, and they're going to try to help you, but they can't really help because they can't actually solve the problem. Right? And they didn't care about you before, but now they're going to care about you now. And isn't this just, crying for help? And I'm not strong. I should be able to fix it myself, but I can't. So you end up going down these routes and end up falling into ideas and taking actions that normal, healthy people wouldn't. But because you had this pain in you that you can't do anything about, you can't fix, you can't talk about it. It just focuses all your feelings into a little black hole until you either crack or explode, or you come through the other side. This darkness. You stand there with poison in your hand, or stand on top of a building somewhere and look down and go, I could jump, but I'm not going to. There's another person later in this book who is someone that put on the suicide belt, walked into Israel, and decided not to blow herself up, right? Decided to live. And I think that is something to look at very, very, very closely. I think that is something very important, right? To have someone go to the extent of blowing themselves up and choosing not to take it. Because it shows to me that this is, well, it is a political struggle. It is also a very personal one, right? Like, how do you identify folk like that? How do you help them before they choose the bad way out? Right? Mustafa is explaining that he would not take a suicide mission only to go to paradise. His motivation lies in his firm belief that such action can further the Palestinian cause. Right? We think, especially in America, right? The message we get is, all right, so if you die for Islam, you kill yourself, and you get 72 virgins. I mean, how sexist and male-centered can you get? But I suppose it works the other way too. So it's a strange motivation, right? You'd think it would be about happiness or love or meeting God or something, instead of this tarded, sordid affair. But a lot of the times when people die or choose to attack and assault, they're a terrorist member, they're a gang member, it's because doing that action, being part of that group, gives them an identity, gives them a safe place to be harmed and be hurt and be not well. And that's okay. Right? This is just human society, right? If you're not well, if you're sick in the brain, you don't explain that to people. You don't expect them to understand. And if you see someone who's sick in the brain or depressed, you think, oh, I can fix that. I can solve the depression. I can solve their angst. I can take them out of this environment and they'll be better. But it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it takes years, decades, even. Sometimes it's like, depression. It didn't go away. It comes back and back and back and back. And it goes away, and then it comes back and goes away and comes back and goes away and comes back. And you just never, it's like a way of life eventually. Dealing with that and knowing that sometimes you got to just lay down and take a nap in the middle of the day because you're mentally exhausted, or knowing that there are certain jobs or activities you aren't very well equipped to deal with. You have to know what works for you. And like she talks to other people in this book where they choose guns or drugs or sex as something that works for them to numb the psychic pain, But something else that can numb psychic pain, as I think most people sort of recognize, is a religion, or is a movement, is a group. Is like, who do cults prey upon? Folk who need to belong to a group. Folk who want to have a higher purpose. When we join the military, like you're told over and over again, right? It is for the country, it's to protect the people. You're doing an important job. You are important. Same here, right? Religion is all mixed up in it, of course, but a lot of the issue is political and is personal. Is my life sucks and I got to do something. May not be the smartest something, may not be the most righteous or most moral something, but I'm going to do something. So he says here, okay, she says, I haven't seen a destroyed home yet, but I've been told that it's Israeli practice to destroy extended family, communal homes, and retribution if one of the members is active in a terror cell. So again, this is, I don't even know what to think about that. Is idiocy. Okay, so you understand the idea, right? Your son goes and joins a terrorist cell, then attacks some Israeli soldiers or civilians. The Israelis come to your house and blow it up. Why? Because your family member chose the terrorist way of life. And the idea, of course, is either that the family is actually supporting this person, and the family helped this person, the family directed this person. They're just pretending to be estranged from them. And so we're going to attack the family. We're going to blow up the family's house to make sure that they don't help him, that they know that helping these terrorists is a bad idea. The other means of doing this, of course, is revenge. Right? This person attacked us. Well, we're going to attack you. Don't attack us. Don't be a terrorist. Don't blow yourself up. Don't kill any Israelis, because if you do, we will destroy your house, we will destroy your family's home. Your family will suffer because of your actions. If you want to stay safe, don't fight. Meanwhile, what it seems to me such an action actually does, going in and destroying houses, blowing them up with explosives at 3 a.m, because a member of that family is joined a terrorist group, causes more terrorists to pop up. You end up assaulting every member of that family who recalls now that they've been humiliated, they've been destroyed. Every person in that town knows that the Israelis can just come in, that they have all the power. Every child is aware that they are not safe, can't ever be safe. What's the saying? Violence only begets more violence. And there are ways to hit back. There are ways to stop violence with violence. That does work sometimes. But it's a very dangerous action. Ideally, you get 2 tigers who get into a little tussle and recognize that they're going to be hurt. They're going to take some damage if they continue this fight. So they both back off and they both have their territories. Ideally. But if one of the tigers believes he's stronger, just kill the other one. If there's not enough territory to support one of these tigers, not enough to feed on, not enough to eat, not enough to drink, then they're going to fight and to expand their territory anyway, just in order to survive. And human beings aren't tigers. It's not just 1 or 2 tigers in the middle of a forest. No, it is hundreds of thousands. It is millions of people acting every which way that you're trying to hit and attack, and what's going to happen is someone's going to fight back on each side. There's lots of blame, I think, about the Palestinians and the Israelis and 1948, 1964, and the Intifada's and whatnot. But, you know, the conflict is literally older than my parents. The conflict is quite literally older than my grandparents, right? It's been going on for so long, and there's so many reclamations back and forth and back and forth. And growing up hearing about this stupidity my entire life. It's in the news today. It's been in the news for weeks, for months, for years. Like, you know, sometimes like half the world is looking at this small cursed little land. Tell me about the settlers, I prompt. Fatima is wide-eyed and says, I'm so scared of them, they'll do anything to you. She recalls how our friends were at a checkpoint when a settler began shooting at Palestinians randomly until an Israeli soldier disarmed him. There's a road now in their area that is restricted only to settlers. No Palestinians can use it. Right? You know, one of the problems of modern Israel is these settlements. You know, you take a bunch of Israeli folk or people of Jewish descent or whatnot, and give them the rights to a plot of land in the area that was formerly Palestine and is now just a town. You give soldiers to guard them, you let them farm, you make roads that are safe for them, and you constantly push and push and push. You expand these areas. You place roads between Palestinian settlements. So now there's another checkpoint you have to pass, and you just pushed and pushed and pushed. And she, as this girl describes here, like, she's scared. Because what are you going to do if you are, let's say, a member of a tribe, a member of a group? If you're black, right, and you see on the news some black kid being shoved face first into the concrete and dying by police, you're going to feel, oh my gosh, but for the grace of God, there goes me, right? If you look at a piece of news and it involves something horrible that has happened to someone, oh, they have lost their lives, or they were lost everything in a Ponzi scheme, or they suffered, you're going to say, oh, could have been me, right? What you're also going to do is next time you're out walking and you see someone being hassled, you're going to think, I'm on their side, right? You're going to think, I am biased towards them. If someone tells me, oh, I was stopped by the police for driving while black, right? The first time you hear that, I'm like, I don't know. Is that a real thing? The 14th time you hear that, you're going, okay, I'm just going to assume you were stopped for driving while black. Because I've heard this story so many times that obviously there's something going on here. And when you hear about a shooting by the police are shooting somebody, is your first thought, oh my gosh, this hardened criminal that the police shot, he must have had a gun. He must have been attacking them. He must be dangerous and on drugs. Or was your first thought, oh, the police probably raided the wrong house and, shot some mother and her child when they were lying on their bed because they got the address wrong. Right? These are stories that have happened. These are things that go on. These are the identities we have. And so you hear that first story and you're going, oh my gosh, who's on what side? It's the same here. if you have a disagreement between a Palestinian and Israeli settler, you can go on whose side you're going to be on. Whose side are you automatically going to be on? Because ideally, you look at that and you say, let me look at the facts, let me take all the information in, let me decide what's going on, have a very clear picture, and there are laws which define this and that. But as we all know, when you get into the actual situation, right, it's like work, right? How many times have I been at work where somebody comes in and they give me a sob story, and I'm going, okay, I could probably get in trouble for doing this for you. I could probably get in trouble for telling you this. I could probably get in trouble for, extending your stay. I used to work at a hotel, right? And something would commonly happen is people would come back and they say, oh, can I check out late? Or someone is coming with the money to pay for the next day. And you'd have to decide then and there as you're standing at the front desk, is this person telling the truth? Are they reliable? Right? Or am I going to be calling the police at 4 o'clock in the afternoon today to get this person out? Because that happened too. Right? They want to sleep for a little longer. They don't have anywhere else to go. They're going to get picked up by the police and then cited for something, dropped off somewhere. They're like, whatever, this is just daily life, but at least got my 12 hours of sleep in a safe room. But sometimes people actually have that issue, right? Sometimes folk have the money coming in. Sometimes they do just want to check out late. Sometimes it's totally fine. But you have to decide. You make mistakes, of course, sitting at the front desk of a motel. Trusting the wrong person. And there's problems and there's issues and you have to call the police. But over time, you get a sense for these things. You say, oh, I've seen this issue before. I've heard that excuse before. I've heard them try to guilt me into this issue before. And I'm not going to fall for it anymore. Right? And you begin to make better choices. We are human beings. We are biased. We are rude. We come to immediate conclusions. So I think part of the problem that we're going to face here in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is it's so propagandized on both sides, right? It's so filled with information and stories and death. And look at my son who killed themselves. Look at my son who was killed by the other side. Look at my daughter. Look at my house. Look at my people and how they've been attacked. Look at what we've tried to agree with. And the other side just breaks the ceasefire. And, from our viewpoint way across the sea, in mighty America, we're constantly told by each side, you must do this. You're supposed to do this. Don't you want to support the Palestinian freedom movement? Don't you want to support the only democracy in the Middle East? And, focusing on who's good and who's bad doesn't do anything. Focusing on actions. Focusing on what effect does this have. And so, like the Israeli settlement issue, I don't care what the history is, right? I don't care about the religious or the political motivation. I don't care about whatever story any side has come up with about the land or the people or the blood or whatnot, right? I look at this and I go, okay, you have an area where people are living, and then you kick them out and put your people in there. What is that going to cause? Lots of trouble. Okay, let's stop doing that. Oh, but they keep doing it. They keep doing it. Okay, so what that tells me is that at least the right-wing Israeli government, right, which is pushing these settlements, wants trouble. They want conflict and problems. Because it doesn't matter what the motivation is. The actual effect of this is little girls being scared because the Israeli settlement is being built within sight of their village, right? Because there are conflicts and fights between their parents and these Israeli settlers. Results in just terrible issues. I don't really mean to go on about that so much, but it's something that really bugs me, right? It exposes at least some of what I feel is the blatant hypocrisy of the right-wing Israeli state. There's no wish for peace when you're promoting settlements. There's no action taken towards peace in any way whatsoever. It's one thing to have guards. It's one thing to have walls. It's one thing to protect yourself. It's one thing to control the border. It's one thing to keep an eye out. It's one thing to go in and attack or arrest folk. It is entirely different to build your own city by displacing others. That there's no actual reason or excuse for that. The point is to destroy Palestine. It's, just my own little bit there. Every time I hear about a settlement, it's just so freaking annoying. So this is interesting here, right? She says, Fatima says, I wanted to go to a psychologist for so long. I think all people here need to go to a psychologist. They're angry and upset, but everyone is afraid to go. We think psychiatrists are for crazy people. We go to movies for drugs, anything else. Later in spring 2005, when I consult with the psychology faculty at Birzeit University, they tell me that the lack of mental health care and resources is a huge problem in Palestine. In the West Bank, there's only one practicing psychologist. What is it, like 4 million, 3 million people in the West Bank? One practicing psychologist for millions. And she closed down after the blockades in Bethlehem made it impossible for her to work. In Gaza, there's an excellent mental health clinic run by a psychiatrist, Ayed Siraj, with a staff of 40, but it only serves Gaza. Fatima begins to explain her fears to me. I hate loud voices. My ears tingle. If anyone yells, I'm scared and angry. I'm afraid of big knives. I imagine it's going to cut someone, hurt someone. Fatima understands and describes this disassociative fog exactly. You should see me when a soldier comes beside me and demands, where are you going, give me your ID. My hands are shaking, my brain stops. I think they are going to take me to jail. Shoot me now. I hear the bullet coming. So you have... Think of how many people you know who have gone to therapy. Right? Think of how many psychologists you've seen on TikTok talking about an idea. And then imagine that you live in a place where people are killed, where you deal with soldiers all the time, and there are no psychologists. Imagine that you can't even talk about going to a psychologist. You can't even ask for that because it's shameful and wrong and for crazy. Like, you'd be admitting that there's something messed up with your head. And you can't do that. People won't look at you sane. People will think you're bad. People won't trust you. You'll never get married if you're the crazy girl. Right? Imagine that there were no psychologists. There was no professional help with trauma. Right? We think we have problems with our parents or our school or work. We get stressed out. But what do you do when there's no answer? How many people do you know who are messed up in the head and refuse to get help? Now, times that by 100. Good. And something else interesting here, I think, is something to talk about. Right? It says, why are the soldiers so violent, I ask, wondering what provokes them. Fatima tries to explain. If a child throws a rock at them, they stop and pick him up. I realized she cannot explain why the soldiers act as they do, only how terrified they make her feel. I learn as I go along that many of the young Israeli men and women who serve their military duty in the occupied territories and on the checkpoints don't want to be there and are also terrified. They are young and afraid, knowing that at any moment they can be killed in a senseless act of terrorism, and makes some of them angry and trigger happy. But Fatima cannot emphasize well with their terror. She is too caught up in her own. I'm talking about the Palestinians and their issues, but what sort of issues do the Israelis have? Right? The Holocaust is used as sometimes an excuse to make horrible choices, or an excuse to give the benefit of the doubt to the Israeli state. But it was a real thing, right? It is an effect. It was involved. Millions died. Orphans abounded. No place was safe. There was an attempted extermination. And what does that do to a people? What does 2,000 years of not having a homeland do to the psyche of the nation? Right? When you are like I know people personally who were drafted for the war in Vietnam, went over there, were involved in terrible battles, come back and don't want to talk about it. People who just aren't right in the head, people who have PTSD from Iraq and Iran. I mean, from Iraq and Afghanistan. So we're going to hear a lot in this book about Israeli soldiers beating somebody up, or torturing somebody, or shooting somebody. But they're people too. And imagine you are drafted, you're picked in a lottery to receive some training, hold a gun, and interview hundreds of people every day, any one of which might explode at any moment. Any one of which might try to kill you. Every single one of which you think hates you and despises you and wants to destroy your entire race, your entire nation. What does that do to a person? Right? How are you going to act? When we in the United States go into certain parts of town, right, and we recognize, oh, this is a gun, drugs, gang, robbery area, we act a little differently. Most of us, I think, can escape this. We can go back home. Most of us can stay in nicer parts of town. Most of us at least know our own block and feel safe there. But you can go places and feel the stress of thinking this is dangerous. I need to watch out for myself. I need to be aware of scams. I'm not going to wander in dark alleys. But imagine if you're walking along, and instead of thinking that, oh, everyone around me is into drugs or gangs, thinking that everyone around me could explode at any moment. Everyone around me hates me and despises me. Like, that's the story you're being told over and over again. And you get so stressed out, I would imagine. And then you shoot somebody for the first time. The sense of power that gives you. Some boy, a little kid, throws a rock at your vehicle, you grab him, you toss him into the prison. Imagine the sense of power that gives you. Now, all those folk who you're looking at the checkpoint and they don't like you, they hate you, you don't trust them, they're going to lie to you. They'll say anything in order to get past you, because they're going to go into your city and your town and kill and destroy your folk. No wonder you end up acting crazy. And I think it's important to criticize both sides here. And also ask who are the ones who are really suffering, because it's the same anywhere you go, right? The leaders stay safe. Or the leaders at least have a place to go. They can hide with families. They can walk into tunnels. They can sit in palaces or bunkers. They're not going with their own hands into the battlefield. The people who make the decisions are, and they get messed up because of that. Then eventually they grow older and they're in charge and they get messed up because of that. I read Netanyahu's biography last year. And one thing I think was very interesting in it is that there was not a single positive mention of a Palestinian person anywhere in the book. It was 700 pages long. There was no positive mention of a Palestinian person. There was no sense that the great issue facing Israel was anything but an evil to be dealt with. So I'm very wary of the official line. I think it's important to read books like this, interviews with individual people, and see how they view it. I think I would like to read a book with interviews of Israeli soldiers or interviews of people who have lost members of their family. Right? Like, you hear, oh, so-and-so, I was a Palestinian kid and the soldiers picked me up and they beat me and they threw me in jail and I was held there. I didn't know how long and I couldn't contact anybody. It was cold and they made me, step on some symbol or whatnot. But what about the people who do that? And what about the people who are in charge? What about the folk who pick up a 12-year-old kid for throwing rocks and toss him in the jail cell, trying to teach him, don't do that. Don't fight back. What are the excuses used? What are the reasons for why you grab thousands of prisoners and keep them? Right. Yes, Fatima answers. Since the second Intifada, I know I can be killed any time. Before it started, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a Spice Girl. All my friends decided which one we were, and I was Baby Spice. I wanted to be modern and wore my veil only after school. Then, when the second Intifada started, I was in a minibus with a group of girls when gunshots fired in our direction. If the bus was not moving so fast, one of us would have been shot dead. At that moment, I became so afraid of dying. Fatima explains she became more religious with the threat of imminent death and couldn't stand to think of dying without her veil, hijab on, fearing that failing to follow the traditions of her faith in that moment of her death might compromise her eternal soul. Her story makes me reflect how religion and extremism often gain importance in cultures when people feel threatened. We're talking about terrorism here, and it is an Islamic terrorism. It is a religious terrorism. Later in the book, she talks with people in Belgium and London about the wrong sorts of lessons being given. Right? She talks with some guy who's like, I was told this by the terrorist recruiter and this and this and this. And something seemed a bit odd. So eventually I learned Arabic and read the Quran myself, and I understood what was actually happening, and they had given me the wrong lessons. Right? Why does religion work? Why is religion part of extremism? Because it inspires you not to question. Religion, to a great extent, is really about dealing with death. About confronting the short passage of your immortal soul from babe to bones. So, yeah, terrorism, suicide bombings, that's going to end up matched with religion. Because it's all about death. When you're living in a land and you're just in some school bus one day and then you get shot at. Like, you didn't do anything, you're 12 years old or 8 years old or whatnot. But all of a sudden there's fires and battles and things going on. You become afraid. You change the way you live your life, right? It's like the first time you're wandering in the backyard and you happen across a baby squirrel or a baby bird, and you pick them up, you put them in a box, you bring them inside, you want to help them, and you can't, they die. then you realize, oh, that could be me. Right? It's like the first time one of your family members dies, or one of your pets dies, or the first time you realize that I could die. Right? Like you're wondering, you're wandering along the side of the road, and a car comes barreling in, misses you by literally an inch. Like you can reach out your hand and touch it, and it's going 30 miles an hour or something. It drives you off the road. You end up with a skinned knee. You realize, oh, something a little bit off could happen, and I'd gone kaput. How does it change you? What does it do? And the younger it happens, the stronger the effect. Right? When you don't have a support system, you don't have psychologists, when you're confronted with this issue day in and day out, when you're walking past soldiers with guns all the time, when it's not just like some road where you were attacked once. No, it's like everywhere. It happens again and again and again. Right? How do you deal with that? It says, we saw the same in Chechnya, a great increase in religious fanaticism with those who have been highly traumatized. I wonder how much it takes for people with traumatic past to re-encounter a serious life threat, to gravitate to extremist religious messages that endorse terrorist violence as the answer to calm their fears of death and dying. So again, this is just basic human psychology, right? If you are beaten by your parent as a child, what are you most likely to do? Beat your own child. Because that's the way you teach them. That's the method. I had to suffer this. It worked for me. It made me who I am. It made me a better person. Or it better have, because else I suffered from nothing and my parents were evil. You know, my parents were good. My parents taught me a good lesson, and they did it with a paddle. So I'm going to do the same thing. Because it works. Right? You repeat the lessons that you were taught. It's the same if you're a bully, right? Hey, you get beat up at home, your dad beats you up or something. Well, you go and you beat up some other little kid in the playground. Why? Because now you're the strong one. It's the same here. If you're confronted with death and violence, if you think that the soldiers are going to shoot you, then you can ideally come to terms with your death. You can achieve a Zen state moment by moment. You can say it's all atheistic and it doesn't matter what happens. You can treat each day by day as if it was always the same. You can say, I'm already dead. I've accepted my death, so let me live each day as if it was my last. Or you can deny it. You can say, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to die. You cover your ears, you hide, and you stuff yourself in a closet, hoping that nobody enters the room and shoots you. Right? We all do this as children. We're sitting there in bed with the covers over our head, thinking that there's a monster under the bed or a monster in the closet, and if we just stay still and quiet, they won't get us. But eventually, we have to move, right? You have to go to the bathroom. Eventually, morning arrives, and you have to get up. And it's safe when there's light, but what if there's no light? What if the light never comes on? What if you're just stuck here? Well, maybe what you do is you pick up a knife and say, come and get me, you monsters. Maybe what you do is you throw something under the bed to feed them. Maybe what you do is you pick up a stuffed animal and you carry it around. Maybe what you do is you pick up a book and you carry it around with you to go to the bathroom because it makes you feel safe. It's the exact same thing, right? You can pick up a religion. You can pick up an idea. You can respond to violence with violence. You can repeat the activity that harmed you and assaulted you and embarrassed you so much on somebody else because now you're in charge. Now you're strong if you do this. Right? You can say, I'm going to die, and I accept that. And now if I'm going to die, am I going to die for a cause, or am I going to die as my own selfish person? Right? We can recognize this. Terrorism isn't weird or strange. It's a very human reaction. Right, here's a girl who was arrested. From now on, you are under arrest. I was 17 and a half at the time. After an hour and a half, I was no longer blindfolded. I saw my sister through an open door. I pushed the soldier aside and screamed to her, "I am under arrest." Then they arrested her too and made her sign a paper saying that nothing happened to me. During the next 3 hours, they checked all our bags and bodies. Next, they took me to a station in Eilat. All the rooms there were open. You can see the other Israeli prisoners. I stayed overnight. They took us to court and told me that I was forbidden to speak with my mother, father, or to a lawyer. After 1 week, the interrogations began. It was 18 hours per day from 6:30 a.m. to 12:30 at night for 2 months. I was under a bad situation. They didn't beat me, but they burned a cigarette into my leg. She carefully lifts her skirt to show me the scar from a cigarette burn. It was very painful, she continued, but I didn't scream. They asked, "It didn't hurt?" I said no. Then they made another one. They put me in a cell with a woman who was taking drugs. I was screaming so hard. The soldier came and said, "Shut up," and beat me on my face, arm, and shoulder until I was black and blue. She describes the challenges and humiliations being a female prisoner. I got my period. I asked for sanitary napkins. The guard said, where the hell do you think that you are? This is prison. I had a sponge for cleaning. They took my bra away and left me with just 2 pairs of underpants. At court, they gave me trousers and a shirt. This dress without a bra in front of the soldiers was very immodest for me. After 2 months of 18-hour daily interrogations, I still did not admit to plans of kidnapping a soldier. They put me in handcuffs, holding me in different positions for stress, for hours. After 2 months, they took me to isolation. For 2.5 months, I had nothing to read, listen to, or see. I always asked for books, so I continued to study to continue my life, but I got nothing. They allowed me. I got 1 hour outside my cell alone, with 6 soldiers around me holding sticks to beat me if I did anything, despite the cuffs on my hands and my legs. Suddenly, Princess flushes, the girl flushes very deeply, her whole face red. "What is happening to your face?" I ask. "Is it fear?" Woodenly, she responds, "I don't have fear anymore." It's chilling to realize that after this traumatizing imprisonment, she has learned to disassociate the normal and very useful emotion of fear and claims she no longer feels it. Then what is it that you feel now? What is showing on your face? Princess is confused. She answers, "It's hot. It's really hot, like something exploding." "What is it? Anger? Rage?" "Rage," she answers, "not fear. I just saw the things I have been through. I succeeded. I stayed me. I stayed the person that I am. There's nothing I can be afraid of." You know, this is what happens when you're traumatized, when you're over-traumatized, right? When something bad happens to you, you're hurt for a while, you retreat, you talk it out with people, and you repair yourself, you heal, you get over it. But when something bad happens to you, and it's really bad, when something bad happens to you, and it happens for a very long time, then you don't get over it. You disassociate. You stand there as you're being beaten or lectured or blamed for something, and you are outside yourself. You are like, "I'm not here. I'm just existing," right? And if you're getting hurt or you're getting embarrassed, it's just flesh and blood. It's just time. It's just words. It can't hurt me. It's not strong enough. You know, I will survive this. And all I have to do in order to survive is stand still. All I have to do is not move. Don't fight. Don't struggle. Don't try to exert myself, because if I do, I'm gonna get thrown to the ground, and my arm's gonna get pulled up behind my back. I'm gonna get in pain. If I do, I'm gonna get locked in my room. If I do, then I'm gonna get blamed for this. So you just stand there and you do nothing. And then later you try to process it, and you respond in the same way, right? You do nothing. You sit there in your room and you go, okay, what do I feel about this? And you're ashamed because you're not strong or good and you couldn't stop it. But you got to live, right? You got to survive. So you disassociate more and more. And then eventually you tell yourself, I'm feeling something. But you can't, again, you can't fix it. You are bad and weak. So you end up feeling this rage, right? You end up being mad. You end up screaming at the mirror. Or you end up ranting to yourself in an empty room. Or you end up writing some really disturbing poetry. Or you end up Googling things online, which lead you down dark paths of the internet. Because you don't know what to do. You don't know how to fix it. And talking helps a little bit. But the real issue isn't the talking. The real issue isn't the explaining and the understanding. The real issue is, what do I do? What action do I take? Because this is going to happen again. Right? And am I going to be, a scared little kid all my life? No, you say, I will take my power. I will regain my strength by doing something. And, I have books and stories that say, be a hero, invent, right? Make art out of this, help other people. Right? That's how you do something. That's how you become strong. But what if there was another group? What if there was someone whispering in your ear saying, you can be strong by hitting back. You can be strong by attacking them. You can be strong by doing this. And you can't beat up the soldier from 10 years ago. He locked you in jail, right? You don't know the actual person who fired the bullet that killed a sibling. But you know the uniform. You know the name. You know the people. It's the same on the other side, right? You don't know the person who actually walked into the movie theater and blew themselves up, killing your mother and sister. But you know who they are. You know their people. You know what kind of folk that is. And you got to do something, right? So ideally we process it. Ideally we grow with it. But what if there's another message, right? What if the devil is whispering in your ear with the guise the devil always has, which is nice and shiny and bright, till you look deep into his eyes and realize that there's something wrong inside. But it sounds good. It feels like an answer to be mad, to strike back. And you can tell that I'm afraid, but much, much easier, much, much safer to disassociate. Because then you don't have to act, you just have to survive. And eventually you can have rage. You can have rage later. You can respond later. You can rant to yourself later. You can scream and write poetry later. But for now, you suffer in silence. Right? So it's like when is the trigger? What causes someone to act as a terrorist? What causes someone to shoot a little kid for throwing rocks? What causes someone to attack? Most of the time, it's because they're afraid. Most of the time, it's because I'm worried that something is going to happen. I don't really know what, but like the feeling is the same. When it's someone who looks like that, or someone who talks like that, or someone who's screaming, or a physical altercation, or a crowded room where it just reminds you of something, or an organization. right? There's nothing I can be afraid of. I'm not that weak person anymore. And this is something that as individuals we struggle with. How do you say that I was weak and I accept that, and yet I want to remain myself without the weakness? I've stolen or killed, or I've been told that I'm bad. And I don't want to reject that. I want to healthfully, I want to grow with health by using these torments and hatreds and pains and turning them good, transfiguring them, transforming lead into gold. And that's difficult. And there's no one to help you, and there's no psychology. When you're stuck in isolation, there's no books to read, right? Like when I'm down, when I'm really down, I'll go and watch Slayers, or I'll go and read Emerson. And, if I didn't have that help at certain times, who knows what would have happened to me? If I couldn't retreat into fantasy and read stories of books and heroes, if I couldn't read philosophy and struggle with those issues, then who knows what would have happened to me? And I think it's important to ask ourselves that, because we've all gone through instances which are similar, where we are struggling, and we found a book or a person or a story or a music or an artist who helped us deal with that and refocus ourselves. I've never been in prison and blamed and attacked, right? But she says here, how do you feel about martyrs? I ask. She says, I used to believe in them, but now I see with courage we can use them in another way. I also think a lot of explosions happen, but we still have prisons, martyrs, buildings, and children destroyed. So how can you fight against what's happened to you, I ask? With my studies, she says, I should study and learn and give understanding to people who don't know about us. I can fight them with this, not stones, not bombs. So if you have the distance from the event, if you have other ideas in your head, if you have the access to different answers, you don't have to listen to that devil in your ear. You don't have to listen to those ideas. Right? You don't have to listen to the causes or the movements that push you to hate or destroy. You can say, you've been fighting for decades, right? You've been killing and destroying for all this time, and nothing seems to have changed. It's just more and more death and death and death. And so how do we get past this? What is the actual answer, right? And this is something that is incredibly difficult on a societal level. Like in Ireland, let's say, how do you come to terms with the Troubles? There's a song I've listened to quite often, which goes something like, it's about a kid in a town named Jimmy or something, and he's a Protestant or a Catholic. Some Protestant or Catholic is picked up by the other side and killed in some event. And so the other side, some Protestant is picked up and killed by a bunch of Catholics. Some Catholic is picked up and killed by a bunch of Protestants. So the opposite side comes and they're going to say, we're going to kill a Catholic, or we're going to kill a Protestant. And they find Jimmy and they bring him out and they string him up. And there were flowers at his funeral. Right? When you have that battle back and forth, how do you deal with it? When you have, Serbia, for example, when you are looking at Rwanda, when you're looking at Sudan right now, when you're looking at Ukraine with the people of Russian descent still there, when you're looking at the United States and the Native American population, right? How do you come to terms with moving past the assaults and the attacks back and forth and back and forth? In Japan and Korea, right? They're squabbling even today over the war and horrible things that happened there. There's, a revisionist prime minister was just elected in Japan, for example. Like, how do you work together knowing that you or your ancestors have done these terrible things? How do you stop the Hatfields and McCoys from fighting? Eventually, enough of them are dead that the ones left alive don't want to fight anymore, and they seek an accommodation. But the other way, of course, is that it goes on until one on the other side is completely destroyed. So what this is telling me is that all the suicide bombers and the terrorism, it just causes more death and pain. Right? I mean, what has Hamas done in Gaza recently? Managed to destroy most of the enclave. Managed to get a few thousand Palestinian prisoners, political prisoners, out in return for tens of thousands dead. Right? They've centered themselves again in the political realm of the world, but in 10 or 15 years, what changes will they actually have accomplished? And how do we stop a terrorist movement from arising again? Because if you repeat the actions of the past, if you build more walls and destroy more houses and attack more people and pass in more settlements and cut off the water or electricity and blow up buildings, and you push and push and push and fight and fight and fight, then in 10 or 15 or 20 years, the exact same story will happen again. But why does it happen, right? It's not just the trauma. It's the hope. It's the story. This girl here is talking about, with studies and learn, give understanding to people who don't know about us. I can fight them with this. And does that work? More than that, are we giving a chance to work? Frankly, the fighting between the Palestinians and the Israelis today seems to me that there are these weakness of wills on both sides. Because what's going to happen in the Oslo Accords is exactly what we expect would happen. You set up enclaves. You surround everything with soldiers. This causes more conflict. Eventually, that conflict erupts in some group or another, attacking or blowing themselves up. This causes a reaction by the other side, which causes more trauma and more reactions from the other side, which causes more trauma and more reactions, more trauma and more reactions, until you end up where we are today. And yet at the same time, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the fact that we signed a ceasefire and yet bombs and missiles are still going off? How do you deal with the idea that we signed the accords and we can govern ourselves as the PA, but also Israeli soldiers can come in anytime they want? How do you go with, we have signed the Oslo Accords and we've come to an agreement about a future Palestinian state, and yet there are still groups killing our people? Right? I'm sure there were voices saying, look, this is a rogue group, this is rogue operatives. We can handle this with our internal security, that this is some out of the blue group
that these riots can be managed, but you have to make a decision, right? As the people in charge, as the individual on the ground who is a member of the riots and the army. How much danger, how much risk can you accept? Is one suicide bomber enough to upset the system? Is 2 or 3? Is one soldier or 2 soldiers arresting folk enough to upset the balance and the trust? Is there a trust built between the 2 groups? Can you build a trust, right? If you want to be like this girl and say, I can fight against what happened to me with my studies, with study and learning and understanding and growing and emotions and connecting. We can go back to Gandhi. We go back to Martin Luther King. We go back to nonviolence. What is required for that actually to work? There are 2 thoughts about this. One thought is that what is required for nonviolence to work is the threat of violence. Right? There are Indian rebel groups, Indian separatist groups, willing to attack the British. And Gandhi is here leading a movement saying, we can do this peacefully. We can work with you. And Britain is to look at this and go, okay, we can work with Gandhi, or we can fight these rebels. Do we have the resources to fight the rebels? Do we have the resources to deal with this? Is the world on our side? Or are we going to take the loss? Are we going to take the L, work with Gandhi, have a workable, useful relationship with India, but lose control of the colony? And the argument that I've heard, at least, is they chose to work with Gandhi because this was the best they could get out of it, right? They could have all of India rise up in rebellion and they could go to war and hopefully maybe win, or they can say, you know what, we're not going to control 200 million Indians with 50,000 British troops anymore. So it's a threat of violence. It's the same in the United States, right? You have Martin Luther King marching, giving demonstrations, and you have groups like the Black Panthers in the back saying, hey, we need to fight. And the time comes for the United States government to realize, oh, we're going to lose this battle, right? Or we're going to have to fight, right? And do we really want to deal with black terrorism? Or are we going to make it work with the nonviolent movement? Is it strong enough, right? That it's a threat of violence. It's a threat of, if you don't answer us on the street, you'll answer us with a gun, that causes nonviolence to work. The other idea, the Gandhian idea, at least that he talked about, as I understand it, is that by being nonviolent, you fight people with your spirit, right? You look the soldier in the eye who's going to kill you, and can he pull the trigger? He's looking at you and he looks up and there's you and you and you and 50, 100, 200, 1,000 people behind you. And by golly, they are going to get to the sea and they're going to pick up some salt off the shore. And, the soldier knocks you down with a rifle butt. You get up, he knocks you down again. You get up, he knocks you down again. You get up, he knocks you down again. Finally, you're unconscious, and the next person stands up, steps forward, and just tries to walk through the gate. Then he knocks you down. And it happens again and again and again. And what's the soldier going to do? Knock down 10 people, 50 people with the butt of his rifle? Is he going to fire and cause death? Right? There are pictures of the police forces in the American South using fire hydrants, using police forces on peaceful protesters, beating them up. And this was too much for the nation. This was the push that made the people who didn't really care about racism all that much rise up and say, we have to do something about this, right? You fight on and fight on, changing hearts and minds with the pure effort you put forth, right? But does that work? Will it work? How does it work? One of the problems we'll see later on is that there's no real Palestinian leadership. The PA is corrupt. There's a bunch of terrorist organizations. Hamas is obviously problematic. Right? There's no central core of Palestinian leadership that I can find. But there is certainly an Israeli one. There's a very strong Israeli government. So when you have a scattered people fighting against a centered people, structured people, together people, then one of those is going to lose, and it's not going to be the folk who stand together. But again, how do you do that? How can Israel act so as to create a Palestinian leadership that is non-violent, that is trusted? You have to give up some power, right? You have to say, I do not control the situation. You have to say that what I've been doing for the last 100 years hasn't been working. Let's try something else. Let's give it time. And it may not work. That's always the problem. It might not work. You might accept being hit and attacked, and they just hit you more, and they hit you more. Right? The Palestinians might say, we're not going to send suicide bombers, we're not going to be terrorists anymore, we're not going to attack, we're not going to throw rocks. And the Israelis just keep putting up more and more settlements. It's not working. You may be the Israelis and you say, okay, we're not going to push the Palestinians, we're going to give them self-rule. And then they elect Hamas. And you go, well, that was a wash. We tried. I don't know. There's no real easy answer, right? For the hope this girl has that they can fight with studying and learning and understanding instead of violence and guns. Right. He says, this makes us... Okay. I'm sure after a while, if you come back, you will see more awful things that will happen, like building a wall. This makes us feel more like monsters. We are not monsters. Just imagine a cat in a cage. Many of the Palestinians refer to pressure, and I think it is what I would clinically call bodily arousal. Heart pounding, sweaty palms, physiological responses in the body due to fear. I ask Hamid to clarify what he means by this word, and he explains, I know the life I have is not right. I am abnormal. I hope to change. When the Palestinian Authority, the PA, came in 1969, we expected that life would become normal again, that our father would come back. This that we hoped for, we didn't get. He was working to give ideas to the people about the Palestinian case and to struggle for it. The PA collaborated with the Israelis and took him too. Yes, I am ready to die for my country, but I'm not with the idea of martyrdom by suicide. Why should I go and die when I can make a bigger difference with my life? I nod and understand that she is not interested to volunteer herself as a suicide bomber. She feels that there are many other ways to fight and that she can be effective in those ways, although if things got desperate enough, she would. A sentiment that I am finding is shared by many Palestinians. When I lose someone, when someone is arrested, shot, or killed, or reach a point where I cannot concentrate on anything, I feel I am lost too. Do you need your anger to keep yourself together? Yes, she answers. Anger pushes me further. It gives me hope. How would you feel if your brother or a close friend went as a bomber? I would be sad, she answers, but the one who is dead choose to do it. It's an honor. It doesn't mean our sadness will control us. Right? Martyrdom is not the aim. We love life and the future, not to die. There are thousands of ways to fight. With love and learning, we can overcome this. And even if you are depressed, it does not mean that you will join an organization. As I listen, I wish to believe him, but I know there are plenty of terrorist groups that would gladly take advantage of him in a depressed and suicidal state. It goes on and on. One of them tells Al about his brother who was arrested by the Palestinian Authority for writing political graffiti on the wall, jailed for 9 months, and released with psychological problems. His hands would shake after he came out of the prison, and he began to think he was the greatest man in the world. Grandiosity can also be a system of schizophrenia, which can be triggered by extreme stress as well. Al's informant describes his brother's prison experience. The prison cell was 2 meters by 3 meters, and he was held in solitary confinement. He was beaten so much even our parents could not recognize him. He became so used to being alone that when he was freed, he couldn't handle being around others. Abu Thayer is indicating that many Palestinians are outraged. The Palestinian Authority, in an effort to win back their own self-determination, made a cooperative agreement with Israel to imprison and even mistreat their own militants who are fighting against Israel for Palestinian freedom. Right? The arrests of some make all the youth fear and contemplate the possibility of their own arrest. From September 2000 through 2003, the IDF reported 40 plans for suicide attacks to be carried out by minors. 29 of these carried to completion. Many of these involved 14 and 15-year-olds. I mean, this is it. Just she's barely entered Palestine. I'm on chapter 10. And there's 60 chapters in this book, and I'm already freaking out a little bit. I'm went through and I marked a bunch of lines that just goes on and on and on and on. So I'm going to stop here, and after this I will skip around more. I'm not going to read so much from every single line, but I think a lot of the original ideas are just in that first chapter, right? If you read this without getting into the bits where I get triggered because it reminds me of something in my life. Just by the descriptions of the dissociative feelings and so on. As we get more and more into specifics, right? It just, you hear this time after time after time after time. That thrown in jail or attacked, and they feel powerless. They feel as if they can't do anything, so they choose to fight back, explode. And when we as individuals who are relatively normal and safe explode, we scream and we shout and we throw things. But if you're in a place where screaming and shouting and throwing things is the exact same as getting yourself shot, well, then you may as well go out in a blast, is the idea. The book is talking to terrorists. The book is trying to understand it, and she hasn't even talked with any of the bombers or the families. She's just talking with regular kids she finds in the university, and every bit of it is just trauma to the max. So, books like these are hard for me to get at, but it's also important to recognize that, our traumas and our problems are not that different from the traumas and problems we see in the world. That the people we see on TV on both sides have their own agendas and their own messages, but are also just people, the same as us, reacting to their own environment with their own philosophies and their own reasons and reasoning. We don't want to block them off and simply label them evil. We want to understand what is happening here. And also, I think, understand ourselves and the way we react. I'm American, and we have our own traumas, our own histories of racism or 9/11 or wars like Vietnam and Afghanistan. We have economic problems and so on. It's not the same, but it's not so different either.